Hey guys, this is your host, and today we're going to be answering a very interesting question. The question that we're going to answer today is, what if the internet just shuts down? Not just for a day, but forever. Like someone flicks a switch and the internet just stops existing. What would happen? Let's find out. Before we get into what would happen, let's try to figure out why the internet might go down. This is all hypothetical, of course. But let's say there was some kind of solar flare that disrupts satellites in the upper atmosphere. And these satellites control communications between countries. Without the ability to communicate with each other, countries might fall into chaos. People rely on these systems not just for communication, but for things like banking, buying things online, and even getting food delivered. The modern world relies on the internet, and without it, people would have to revert back to more primitive forms of communication and commerce. People would no longer be able to use email, text messages, or make phone calls. They would have to resort to things like carrier pigeons, letters, or even smoke signals to communicate with each other. Obviously, this is an extreme example, but it illustrates how fragile our society has become. We've become so dependent on technology that it's hard to imagine what would happen if it all just stopped working. In fact, there was a documentary done by the BBC in 2018 that followed 6 people for a week without any technology, and the results were astonishing. Within the first few hours, the participants began to feel anxious and agitated. They tried to reach out to friends and family on their cell phones, but were unable to get through. After a few days, they started to feel isolated and cut off from the world. By the end of the experiment, most of them had completely lost their minds. Now, obviously, this is just a documentary, and it's not real life, but it does show how fragile our minds are when it comes to technology. What's funny is that most people couldn't even go one day without their phones. They would literally go crazy. So now you're probably wondering what would actually happen if the internet just shut down. Well, the first thing that would happen is chaos. There would be riots in the streets. People would be running around like headless chickens, and there would be complete and utter anarchy. The second thing that would happen is panic. People would start to panic about what would happen next and how they would survive without the internet. The third thing that would happen is survival mode. People would need to start taking care of themselves and their families in the absence of the internet. This would mean things like growing your own food, finding alternative sources of energy, and learning new skills. The fourth thing that would happen is adaptation. Eventually, people would adapt to life without the internet. They would learn new ways of doing things, and new technologies would emerge. It's important to remember that the internet isn't going anywhere. It's here to stay. However, it is possible that it could be shut down for a short period of time. If this were to happen, it would be disastrous. We would lose the ability to communicate with each other, to do business online, and to access important information. It would also cause widespread panic and chaos. So let's just hope it never happens anytime soon. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to share it with your friends and family. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.